Temper. Hare Krishna, please come. There's a lot of room here. And you can be comfortable. I mean, there's no compulsion. Be there. Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Pastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vriksha Namaste Krishna Padaya Prabhupada Chatatmane Gaura Karuna Shakti Bhakti Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamini Namaste Saraswatevam Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Shunyavadim Pashataya Vedadarine Om Ajnanatimrandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmalitamena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitamena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Gurum Shri Yuttapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamsha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare Nityananda Vadutendur Vasudha Prana Vallabha Janava Jivita Patihi Krishna Prema Prada Prabhu Padmavati Sutta Sriman Sachinandana Purvajaha Pavon Matta Jagat Prata Rakta Gaura Kalevaraha Namo Namo Aniruddhaya Rishikesha Indriyatmane Namah Paramahamsaya Purnaya Nivritatmane Swarga Pavarga Dvaraya Nityam Sachi Sade Namah Namah Hiranya Viryaya Chaturotraya Tantave. So I guess we left off right at the 4th chapter, or was it the 5th? It was the 4th. Which verse was it? 7th. Okay, it's been a while. Was it 6 weeks? More than 6 weeks. 7 weeks actually. So what would be better would be for us to summarize and then we could make plans for the future, right? Because that would kind of set the stage for future discussions, given the fact that it's been 7 weeks. We could have forgotten what was discussed in the past. Just to summarize, so that everybody is familiar with our approach. Every time we started out on a new chapter, we touched upon the basics of the reason why Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita, what was the purpose of the Bhagavad Gita, what is to be understood, and what is the specific guidance which is going to be offered to us. So let's get back right to the beginning. The beginning of the Bhagavad Gita is a description of extreme complexity. It's a very complex situation. It's a battlefield. And then in the battlefield, Krishna is speaking a great message of pure love. So it's a paradox. It's a contradiction that it's a battlefield. Two armies are poised. Krishna is sitting with Arjun and he is sharing the message of pure love. So it's quite a complex situation right in the beginning. Now, why was there such complexity? Why was a scenario and circumstance chosen by Krishna for him to be able to deliver a message of such complexity? That's the first question that we want to ask ourselves. We have spoken about this several times in the past. Why is there a need for complexity to pass on a profound message? Exactly. So the mind is not cluttered. The mind is not cluttered and one is able to focus in a situation of complexity because there's a complete reprioritization of life. Right? When there is a crisis in life, it is that time that we take inventory. We do not take inventory of life when things are going smoothly. Be it professional aspects of life, be it personal, be it health, be it any aspect of our life. It is when there is a challenge, when there is complexity, is we start taking serious inventory. We start assessing how we are spending our time, how is our resource being spent, what is the amount of time I spend on certain aspects of life. We start looking at it very seriously. Now, such complexity is in one sense great suffering. So the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, we see a lot of mental suffering experienced by Arjun. Mental suffering over a prolonged period of time with great intensity induces exhaustion. It's natural. People get exhausted because every day if you have to go and face complexity in life, you get exhausted. And material exhaustion is a prerequisite for spiritual advancement. One needs to have material exhaustion. The propensity to engage the senses and to gratify the senses and to achieve happiness through the body, through the mind, that has to subside for spiritual life to begin. The two do not go well together. So there is great suffering right in the beginning. There's a message which is being given there. There's great complexity, given that any solution which is going to be provided in a situation like the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita is going to fit in and it's going to be useful for everyone, immaterial of their station in life. Because the message is complex. The circumstance is very complex. So if you have a solution for extraordinarily complex circumstances, then automatically such a solution can be adapted to simpler circumstances. Correct? It's logical. It's an inference that can be made that you have a complex solution, you can derive and it can be applied. Right? The solution can cut across. So Krishna chose an extraordinarily complex circumstances to teach the principle of life. He wanted to teach the principle of love. And he chose his pure devotee and disciple. Because no one else was capable of carrying out the circumstances that Arjun was in. It was not an easy circumstance. It was not an easy circumstance, so he chose an appropriate person to receive that siksha. One who is completely surrendered. And he shared the message. Now, what was the message of the Bhagavad Gita? The message of the Bhagavad Gita was very simply that, I've spoken about this before as well, this has to do a lot with the second chapter. The message of the Bhagavad Gita is about resolving an identity crisis. Life brings about identity crisis, and it becomes extraordinarily difficult for people to prioritize because they have an identity crisis. I have many identities. I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a professional, I'm a devotee. Right? Which one of these identities is supposed to take precedence? Time is going to be limited, resources are going to be limited, there's going to be pressures. Which one of these identities is supposed to take precedence in what circumstances? Every one of them is important, but what is going to take precedence? Now go back to Arjun. Arjun was put into complexity. He had to choose between his identity of being a grandson. He had to choose between his identity of being a nephew, being a disciple. His guru was on the opposite side. He had to take that identity into account. He had to take the identity of being a cousin, a brother. All these identities were to be considered by him, right? And yet Krishna said, there are duties associated with all these identities. You have a relationship in this world, there's a duty associated with it. There is no such thing as a relationship where there's no service. There's always a service relationship because that's the purpose of relationships. Right? No matter anyone who claims that they have a relationship and they don't have service between the two personalities, then in such a relationship it's just a sentiment. there really isn't any relationship there, because the whole idea of relationship is rasa, which means there has to be a service bond. It is the intrinsic, fundamental nature of a living entity to serve another. And it manifests itself in multifarious ways through different identities. Right. So every identity which Arjun had, there was a bond, there was a relationship, and there was a service attitude. He had to serve them in one way or the other. There was a duty born of such a relationship. Krishna pulls him up on the battlefield and he gives him a message saying, yes, you have all these identities, but then you have an identity which is a relationship with me. That identity takes precedence over everything else. Right? And that is your real nature. Everything else is temporary. Right? Everything else is temporary because we change our bodies lifetime after lifetime, and in each lifetime you have a complex set of relationships, and sometimes the roles are switched. Sometimes someone is a husband in the previous life. In this lifetime the person becomes a wife. Right? You receive service and you start giving service. I do not know. Right? Bad food, and then this time again bad food. It's returned back. Right? I'm not saying that's the case, but I'm just saying, it could be one of those situations. Brothers, right? Brother and sister. Sometimes there's a bond, and sometimes there's duty, sometimes there's karma, and it is exchanged. It goes on lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, because it's complex. Right? So now Arjun had this relationship, and Krishna is saying, there's a duty born out of every relationship that you have here, but there is a super important duty, and that is based on the relationship that you have with me. And he says very clearly that if you want to experience your real nature, you have to prioritize. This is the message of Krishna. He says this very clearly in the 18th chapter in conclusion. Right? And what is the message? He says very clearly, Sarva Dharman Parityajya. And what is dharma? Dharma is duty born out of a relationship. He says, Sarva Dharman Parityajya. Right? Mam ekam sharanam raja. Right? He says very clearly that surrender unto me. The relationship that you have with me takes precedence over every other relationship. It is superimposed. It is superimposed. Right? Aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshayasmi. Which means, essentially, that even though you are prioritizing and keeping me right in the center, it does not mean that you are going to move away from the process of cleansing your debt by serving other relationships. Right? Putra is son. Right? Forefathers are pitrus. Putra is essentially someone who would be able to feed the pitrus. Right? You have this monthly process which goes on where the parents, for those whose parents have passed away, they perform oblations. Right? And then just last month in September, a few months ago, there was Pitru Paksha. There's 15 days in the month of September where you are supposed to offer oblations so that the forefathers are fed. Because there is a debt. There is a certain debt which people are born with. There is debt to earth. There's debt to the devas, there's debt to people around us, and the son is supposed to pay back the debt by acting righteously. So every relationship brings forth a certain debt. Right? Rin. Right? In Sanskrit we say rin. Debt. There's a certain connection. And then the son is supposed to take over and perform the duties properly so that the son would be able to relieve the predecessors of their debt. Like for example, the case with Bhagirath. Why is it that Bhagirath searched around and found and wanted to find a solution to bring the Ganges onto the earth? His forefathers violated the fundamental principle of how to treat a sadhu. They committed aparad. Kapila Muni, who is an incarnation of the Supreme Lord, was sitting down in deep penance. And while he was sitting down in deep penance, the horse which was a part of the sacrifice which these kings were performing, it got strayed and it walked into the hermitage of Kapila Muni. And the uncles and the predecessors of Bhagirath fundamentally accused Kapila Muni of being a thief. The moment they said that, the potency of Kapila Muni was so powerful that it just burned them to ashes. They committed aparadh and they were immediately annihilated. They became ashes. Now, who is supposed to deliver those personalities? It became the responsibility of those who followed. So, the father of Bhagirath tried. So many people tried. And finally, he found a solution. And the solution was that Mother Ganges has to come down. And when she washes down, and then everybody would be delivered. So there is a duty born out of relationships. And Krishna is saying, those duties are necessary, it is to be performed. Right? Because those duties relieve us and allow us to make progress, because these are prescribed duties on a year-by-year basis. We make progress because we are performing our duties. Krishna is saying, Sarva Dharman Parityajya, Mam Ekam Sharanam Vraja, Aham Tvam Sarva Papebhyo Mokshayasmi, which he says very clearly. Surrender unto me, because by surrendering unto me, you do not have to fear. Masucha, the duties that you have and the bond that you have outside of the relationship with me, I will take the burden. Sarva Papebhyam Mokshayasmi. He is making the promise, telling Arjun that do not worry. Do not think that you're going against your duties just because you're surrendering unto me. By surrendering unto me, you will be relieved of all sinful reactions. Right? So this is a fundamental message which Krishna is saying, where he is saying, keep me in the center. He is not saying particularly that we should give up our duties. He's not saying that we should give up our relationships. He is not saying go and retire to the forest. You will not be able to deliver yourself. You will not move forward unless you cut yourself away from society. This is not the statement of Krishna. It's misconstrued, misinterpreted, where people completely go from one verse to the other and simply do not understand his message. There are relationships and there are secondary aspects of our life. The secondary aspects of our life are exactly that. They are secondary. And they are supposed to support the primary relationship. That's exactly what it is. The primary relationship is right in the center. Krishna is in the center. The secondary aspects of our life, the different dimensions of our life, are supposed to support the primary part of our life. If the primary is not taken care of by the secondary, then the decisions that we take even on the secondary would be flawed. One cannot take even a monetary decision in isolation of the relationship with Krishna. It's fundamental. Now, let's go back. I was just looking at this calendar for 2012. I had never seen it before. And I was looking at it. The first picture is... Now, the first picture here, it's a beautiful picture, is where the wives of the Brahmanas in the forest bring all kinds of wonderful foodstuff to feed Krishna and Balaram. The husbands were extraordinarily powerful Brahmanas who were engaging in ritual worship and sacrifice. But their focus on ritual worship and sacrifice was so great that they simply could not even recognize the transcendental presence of Krishna and Balaram. But the wives were simpler. They were simpler in heart. They were not completely bewildered by their own intelligence. Intelligence is a huge obstacle. I tell you, I'm not saying that we should be dumb, but intelligence is a huge obstacle in making progress, because there is something called transcendental intelligence, and then there is intelligence which expects that it can understand everything. In other words, transcendental truths cannot be processed by regular faculties. Transcendental truths are revealed to a surrendered mind, surrendered person. It is not something which is just processed through regular intelligence. But regular intelligence needs information. It's an obstacle. So in the second chapter, you see Krishna engaging in Sankhya Yoga. He is saying, you are not this body. Have you not seen the body perishing? You are not this mind. You are not this intelligence. Krishna is engaging in Sankhya Yoga. He is dealing with intelligence in the second chapter. He is putting down intelligence as a barrier, saying, I'm here to deliver a message, intelligence, you move out of the way. Right? Yes, there was adequate information in the Shastras. There was enough information which were provided in the Shastras at that time. There were enough authorities who recognized him. There were enough authorities who recognized him and Balaram as the supreme persons. So there were enough authorities. So even someone who was extraordinarily close to him recognized that he was the supreme person. Extraordinarily close, I'm talking about his aunt, Mother Kunti, nephew. But at the same time, she recognized that my nephew is special. He is extraordinary. Because there were all kinds of signs. There were extraordinary accomplishments. So there were many, many different prophecies by very well-known authorities. So there was enough evidence to accept that the person who they were dealing with was a supreme personality. Right? So the question again, coming back to what the Brahmanas' wives did, they were able to see that this is transcendental, this is Krishna, this is Balaram. What did they do? They forego or let go of their duties to their husbands. The wife is supposed to follow the husband. But in those circumstances, they saw that even though the husbands were not very forthcoming in being able to offer the footsteps of the sacrifice to Krishna, not recognizing that he is the supreme person, he is the Yajna Purusha, everything belongs to him. Not recognizing that, the husbands were continuing with the ritual sacrifice and they refused to entertain the cowherd boys. But the wives, because they were simple, they recognized and Krishna's mercy prevailed and they, forthcomingly, they came out to feed Krishna and Balaram. Right? So now you have a primary relationship taking precedence over a secondary relationship. There is a relationship of being a wife. There are duties that are born of being a wife to a husband, but then there's Krishna. When Krishna comes, Krishna takes precedence. And the relationship that you have outside is meant to support the relationship that you have with Krishna. This is the fundamental precept of the Bhagavad Gita. In the 3rd chapter, there is an intense focus on being able to keep Krishna right in the center and engage in relationships outside of it. Because eating, sleeping, mating, depending on what our social circumstances are, and defending, these are fundamental activities of every living entity. The 3rd chapter talks about how we eat, sleep, mate, defend by keeping Krishna right in the center and thereby relieve ourselves of sinful reactions and make progress. Karma Yoga is fundamentally performing karma, which is eating, sleeping, mating, defending, if you just put it down into the fundamental buckets, whilst keeping Krishna right in the center. This is a part of what Krishna educates. The more and more and more we train ourselves to keep Krishna in the center, our decision making would become perfect. Our prioritization would become perfect. We cannot take decisions in isolation. You cannot, because you will be wrong. How can you take a decision in isolation based on the body and the mind, completely ignoring the needs of your soul, which is the very intrinsic nature of a living entity? So if you're going to be operating on the superficial layer, ignoring the depth, then automatically decision making becomes completely wrong. Yes? Well, the way it happens is not so much that we start looking around and not understanding what a specific relationship is. We have the understanding that everyone around us is a devotee, and we start focusing on their needs as a devotee. When we start understanding that they have a fundamental need of being able to serve the Lord, which is their fundamental need, and we make constructive arrangements for us to be able to facilitate that, then such a relationship and any decision taken in the relationship becomes fruitful. Because now we are taking the time to go deep enough to understand the need of someone who is a beloved, and we are able to provide for them at the deepest level. This may entail refusing at a superficial level, on the bodily level or mental level, to provide for a deeper level of service, to provide for a deeper level of progress. Right? This may entail that. But we want to account for relationships that way. So, the beautiful story of Kardama Muni and Devahuti, which is given in the Srimad Bhagavatam, it's exemplary. It is exemplary for Grihastha life. Imagine the contradiction. The Srimad Bhagavatam provides that extraordinary contradiction. Kardama Muni is an extraordinarily austere yogi who goes into meditation for 5,000 years. Imagine a husband who closes his eyes for 5,000 years. He doesn't speak. He doesn't do anything. For 5,000 years he is gone. He is in limbo. She is the daughter of Manu. She is the daughter of the emperor of the world. She has been raised in the greatest of opulence, and she has been betrothed to Kardama Muni, who is in the forest and he is wearing a bark. He doesn't speak. Speaking is a huge problem, right? Then she is also forced to wear clothes that are made of, the bark and leaves and so on and so forth. She endures that. So the beautiful example given in the Srimad Bhagavatam is that she takes extraordinary care of his needs. She focuses on his needs because understanding that he is an extraordinarily powerful husband. She is 100% focused. Okay, I've got to take care of him because he is engaging in the prime duty of serving Krishna. So that's her focus. And then 5,000 years later, he comes out of his meditation. In Satya Yuga, people lived for a long time. 5,000 years is probably like, 5 hours or 4 hours because they used to live for hundreds of thousands of years. Right? So 5,000 years, he comes out and then he sees around and he sees the condition of his wife. And she is in such a pitiable condition because she is a princess. And then she is covered with dirt because in the forest, you're constantly living in very austere conditions. You have dust coming and so on and so forth. She is covered in dirt. Her hair has become completely matted. She is emaciated, right? Without proper foodstuff. She is constantly eating berries and roots and so on and so forth. He looks at her and he becomes extraordinarily compassionate, thinking that, oh, you have served me so wonderfully. And you have made such a huge sacrifice because this is not your nature to be in such circumstances. I must reward you for such a sacrifice. So it becomes his duty to become selfless. And how does he become selfless? He engages in sense gratification. For a sadhu, sense gratification is selflessness. In the ashrama, he engages in sense gratification. He sees my wife and he says, what do you need? And she says that you, again, if you close your eyes and go into limbo, what will I do? So she says, give me children. Give me children. This is the request coming from a wife to a husband. Now a yogi, a Mahayogi, he is a great yogi who is extraordinarily austere, who is sitting in tapasya. The propensity for sense gratification is almost imperceptible. For him, it's a huge sacrifice to engage in sense gratification to satisfy the needs of the wife. Because the wife made a sacrifice, he feels that he must make a sacrifice. It's an extraordinary example. Very extraordinary example. So through his yogic prowess, he creates mansions and so on and so forth because he also shows in that particular example that in Grihastha-ashrama, right, engaging in Grihastha-ashrama, you need to have facilities. Right? So he uses his powers to create circumstances where he could engage in the duties of a Grihastha. And then very powerful children are born, and then the Lord himself comes as a child. Why? Because the relationship is so pure that the Lord decides that I must come as a child. The consciousness is so high that I must come as a child. He appears as a child. That is Lord Kapila. So in such circumstances, it is not so much that we focus on relationships and say that, okay, oh, I can't see Krishna or I'm seeing Krishna, I will serve you one way or other. That's not the focus here. The focus is that you have to do what is necessary for the relationship. You have to do what is necessary for certain things to make progress, but you will have to take into account what is the deepest level of need. The accountability of the deepest level of need is the responsibility of the husband. It is the responsibility of the leader of the house. A decision has to be taken that this is the most important thing that I have to do for my wife and children. Let me make circumstances that are favorable for them. Because that is their deepest need. They need guidance. Right? So he makes those circumstances making available. So it's not so much that we neglect certain aspects of life. It is not so much that we neglect the actual duties, but we account for it, understanding that this is the property of Krishna. What would Krishna like me to do with this property? He is the real owner. I am not the real owner. This is not an opportunity for me to engage in sense gratification. Krishna is the sense gratification. He has, it is his senses that have to receive pleasure. Right. Material life is complex. That is the struggle. That is essentially the struggle where you have to take into account, and that's where you take the help of community. Because you have people around in the community, you have Vaishnavas who you have confidence in, who you approach for assistance, one way or the other. Right. See, the whole idea is, it requires sacrifice. It requires selflessness. It requires that on both sides. But there has to be a prioritization. There has to be a recognition that the most important duty which is available there is duty to the soul. So let me make circumstances viable so that they can flourish at that level. It is complex. That's the reason why Krishna spoke a chapter on Karma Yoga on how to keep himself in the center. Where the senses are constantly taking precedence and priority, saying my senses are more important. What is it which we get irritated by? We get irritated when our senses don't receive pleasure, isn't it? We become hungry, we become thirsty, we become enraged because our senses are not receiving gratification. We don't have enough sleep. These are aspects of the body. We become enraged because now the body is taking center stage and Krishna is not taking center stage. Decisions will be wrong. Decisions will be wrong. So that's where one has to be able to take a step back constantly and reevaluate. What is a priority? Am I heading in the right direction? What has become a priority? Am I doing this for the body? Am I doing this for the mind? Am I doing this for Krishna? And how do you judge if you're doing it for Krishna? And is it going to be conducive? You're going to be judging that by looking at the aspects of mercy. We spoke about it. How do you recognize it? You recognize by seeing that is this particular move, is this particular recommendation going to allow me to chant better? Is it going to allow me to read better? We read so that we could chant better. We associate so that we could chant together. We serve so that we could chant better. Serving brings forth the quality of humility. And when we engage in service and we try and keep Krishna in the center, we are able to chant nicely. When we chant nicely, we are able to serve nicely. Right? It's not a question of one or the other. They are so intricately connected because chanting is the most important aspect of our life. How do you chant? You chant because you read and understand that chanting is important. The Srimad Bhagavatam, beginning, middle and end, is about chanting. The Bhagavad Gita is about chanting the holy names of Krishna. Right? This is the mission of Lord Chaitanya, the chanting of the holy names. So that's exactly how we rearrange our life, by taking constant inventory. And I'm telling you, the keeping things in the center for us, and I've spoken about keeping Krishna in the center, keeping the chanting of the names of Krishna in the center is our top priority. There is no difference. Nama, naminoho, abhinnatvam. There's no difference between the Nam and Naminoho, who is named Krishna and his names are non-different. So if I have to take a decision in life and I would start thinking, can I chant better? Should I eat something at 6 o'clock in the evening, if it's got a lot of sugar in it, which is not going to allow me to sleep? Will it affect my being able to wake up early in the morning and chant better? Right? Am I going to expose myself to activity which will make it difficult for me to chant better? In other words, the world can put all kinds of samskaras in our impressions in our heart. All kinds of impressions. And those impressions prevent us from processing things properly. It prevents us from chanting. Right? It's almost like an elephant, having a bath. It comes out of water, it throws dust on itself. So sometimes, after we chant, we engage in activity which then forces us not being able to chant again in the morning, because now there's more dust to work on. So the whole idea is, for us in the mission of Lord Chaitanya, since we are so fortunate, so very fortunate to be born and to come in touch with the mission of Lord Chaitanya, this extraordinary good fortune will not be recognized by us until we chant nicely. If you want to know Lord Chaitanya, you have to chant nicely. It's very difficult for us to recognize Him without being able to chant the Mahamantra. Very difficult. Once you start chanting nicely, you will start recognizing the mission of Lord Chaitanya. The attraction to Gaur Leela, the attraction to Lord Chaitanya's movement starts when chanting happens nicely. Because until then, it's difficult to perceive the mission. Right? Because many of us grew up in different parts of India, even outside. We don't recognize Godhead in the form of Lord Chaitanya, or being able to recognize and to adapt and to absorb and to be completely absorbed in the glory of Lord Chaitanya. That happens when we engage in Gaur Leela. And Gaur Leela is the chanting of the holy names and spreading the chanting of the holy names. The mission of Srila Prabhupada specifically is Gaur Leela. When we engage in the mission of Srila Prabhupada, we assist, then we recognize Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission, we recognize the holy names. And it's an extraordinary, extraordinary good fortune that none of us are qualified to receive. One can say that. None of us have the qualification to receive what has been given to us. It is not based on qualification. There has been some Sukruti, mercy has been provided, we have received it. Nobody can be qualified for what Lord Chaitanya has given. No one. No one can be qualified to receive the mercy of Lord Chaitanya. No one is. No one is qualified. This is 100% Kripa. So now we come into the third chapter where we recognize that life is keeping Krishna in the center, keeping His holy names in the center. When we start executing life, keeping the perspective of Krishna in the center, we realize transcendental knowledge, which is what I was talking of. We start recognizing Krishna. We start recognizing mercy. We start recognizing actual Kripa. We start appreciating spiritual association. Appreciation and gratitude comes when there is transcendental knowledge. Right? It's said that, someone gave a covered diamond or a very precious stone to a washerman. And the moment he got it, he said, "Oh, this is so good, I can use it to clean the clothes." Because for him, that was the most useful utility of a stone, because it was shaped, it was smooth, it was a little rough on the edges, whatever the case may be. So one who does not have recognition of what has been given will never have gratitude. It's a fact of life. Gratitude comes when there is recognition. Right? We become grateful. That comes when we engage in service, when we engage in the lessons of the third chapter. Automatically the fourth chapter is revealed. The deeper one goes into the third chapter and acts out by keeping Krishna in the center, takes decisions based on keeping Krishna in the center, the fourth chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, transcendental knowledge, becomes revealed. Until then it's hidden, because no one is acting. Srila Rupa Goswami made a very powerful statement, and he said this very clearly in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. He said, you have to use your limbs in service. Making donations in a temple is good service, but that is not considered to be the limbs of bhakti by Srila Rupa Goswami. Use your limbs in service. Because when you use your limbs in service, then there is realization of keeping Krishna in the center. Because there are experiences, and the more experiences that we have, deeper becomes our faith. One needs to have an experience for us to develop faith. And if you have deep faith, then there are deeper experiences, because you're going to be serving with such consciousness. So that's the journey. For a pure devotee, there's no question of faith. Why? Why? Exactly. For a pure devotee, there's no question of faith, because he is experiencing everything. I don't need faith to understand that you're sitting in front of me. You don't need faith to see me. This is not faith. Because I can perceive your presence, you can perceive my presence. A pure devotee can relish Krishna's presence. So for him, there's no question or need for faith, because he already is having experiences. That's the process. And that process starts with Seva Unmukehi Jihvado. Seva Unmukehi Jihvado. Jihva is tongue. Seva is service. The whole process of Krishna consciousness starts with serving through the tongue. What do? You eat Krishna Prasadam. You eat Krishna Prasadam because Krishna Prasadam destroys karmic reactions and purifies the tongue. Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur, he is right here. He is our predominant Acharya. His statement was, Golokera Premadana Harinam Sankirtan. He says that the Goloka, from Goloka, Krishna descends in the form of the holy name, enters to the mind, and he dances on a purified tongue. And how do you purify the tongue on which Krishna dances? By honoring Krishna Prasadam, and then Krishna dances as the holy name. So that's where Seva starts. Seva starts with a very simple act of honoring Prasadam and avoiding food that is not offered to Krishna. Rejecting things that are not connected. Start with the process of eating and sleeping. Eat and sleep for Krishna. This is fundamental. We do it every day. If you eat and sleep for Krishna, then everything else falls in place. Then automatically there's chanting. Right? So, we will stop here. That's how the 4th chapter is. Right? It's a short summary of the 4 chapters, and the most important aspect being that we keep Krishna in the center, meaning we keep Krishna's names in the center. We act upon our life to prioritize Krishna's names in the center. We constantly work to enjoy, modify and align ourselves so that we could keep Krishna's names in the center. Sleep at a certain time, eat certain things. You see, this is what life is all about, right? People spend time in sleeping and eating for most part. And everything else revolves around how to arrange for those two. How to bring about a shelter and how to eat. Everything else revolves around how to arrange for this. So once you start focusing on the eating and sleeping part and start doing it for the pleasure of Krishna, everything else will fall in place. It is such a simple arrangement and such a simple process. It is not a challenge at all to execute. Right. Stop here. We'll see if there are any questions. Yes. How do you perceive? How do you perceive the super soul working? See, the perception of God occurs in many stages of recognition, depending on the purity of the individual and their advancement. One has the capacity at the highest level to perceive the presence of the Lord and be able to see Him, to have a conversation with Him. But at the lowest level, what do we recognize this as? We recognize the manifestation of God as through His servants, the arrangements that are being made for us to come closer to God. So we start looking at Vaishnavas, we start looking at the arrangements that are being made so that we could come closer to God. And we start perceiving the presence of God because He's making all those loving arrangements around us so that He could bring us closer. Okay? Now, every time, that is the actual truth, every time we act, without the guidance of the super soul, one cannot act. It may be something as simple as crossing the road. The intelligence to do certain things at a certain time is given by the super soul. Right? One cannot act unless the super soul directs. So when we start desiring to engage our senses in sense gratification, Krishna directs us and says, okay, this is what you should be doing to engage in sense gratification because you have chosen to forget me. And then when we choose to remember Krishna, He makes arrangements saying, oh, look up this place. Keep a priority of time. Make sure that you are able to reach at a certain place at a certain time, associate with certain kind of people, avoid the association of others, and so on. Right? So that's how we recognize. Yeah, the fact is that we have done that several times over. We've already done that several times over, where we have been given opportunity and we have forgotten Him. Spiritual life is not static, it's dynamic. Essentially, you either make progress in spiritual life or you start regressing. You cannot remain static. You cannot cruise along. There's no such thing as cruise speed. You either accelerate or you deaccelerate. Okay? So every time you reach a ledge, just as you climb a mountain, and then you reach that ledge and you take inventory of yourself and start looking at what is the specific need for you to go to the next level. And then you start making progress and go on to the next level. So similarly, you reach a higher level, you start accounting for what is required, how do I arrange life, what is my priority, and then you start moving ahead. So if your constant focus is on keeping Krishna's names in the center for you to be able to chant better, honestly, I would give no other, thrust or advice. I would say very clearly, chant. Chanting is the most important thing ever. Everything else is secondary. So if you constantly keep the chanting of the holy names right in the center at every level and take account of your life to see how I can position myself so that I could chant, then you are constantly making progress. If you do not take inventory and you think that you have reached the summit while you have not, you have a chance of again slipping down. Right? What is it said? The road to glory is full of potholes, or I don't know. What is that? I forget the specific proverb or statement. The road to. Anyways, never mind. It's not important. But the fact remains that we start focusing on the holy names and we start moving up. Do we keep coming down? Yes. If you're not going to take inventory of yourself and understand where you are, and then constantly reprioritize, reorganize, and start moving ahead, you're going to have a problem. This is like being a student. You just graduated. So it might be easier for you to relate than any of us. If you had not maintained focus on a week-by-week basis, constantly taking inventory of where you are and what your next step should be, what should be the next course, where am I weak, where should I improve upon, and where should I be spending time, and so on and so forth, then right at the end of the year, when you want to take your final exams, you probably would find it extraordinarily difficult. Right? Because you're going to flounder. At some point or the other, you're going to be walking on a path which you don't recognize. But on the other hand, if every week you took the trouble to take inventory, right, and take the right steps and correct yourself and calibrate yourself, then you have the ability at the end of the year to take your exams comfortably. Krishna would give us multiple indications. The fact is, He loves us more than we love Him. It's a fact of life. Yeah. He is making arrangements. Imagine sending someone as beloved as Prabhupada into this world. Imagine Prabhupada leaving Vrindavan and coming to America. Why would anyone do that? at his age. So now you see the arrangements that are being made by Krishna, and you see what Krishna's servants go through. His special servants go through a lot. You look at any great personality, be it Jesus Christ, Prophet Muhammad, Moses, whatever the case may be, across board, Ramanujacharya, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement, Haridas Thakur, you look at all the acharyas and you would notice that they've gone through extraordinary struggle to be able to give something to the world. This is the love of Krishna that is experienced by us, which is far greater than our ability to love him. How many times would someone who we keep rejecting make arrangements for us to come back to him? Can you imagine that? You reject someone once, twice, and the third time you say, to hell with you, and I'm not going to have anything to do with you. And then this person here constantly tries. He sends his beloveds, one after the other, make arrangements for them. It's a fact. Anything else? Yes, Mataji. Okay. So the question is, in the material world, we have multiple relationships. We have family, practically. We have extended family, we have nuclear family, close family, extended family. And how is how is this typified in the spiritual world? Is it just Krishna? The fact is that the spiritual world and the material world is a perversion or a carbon copy or reflection of the spiritual world. So there, we have close family, we have extended family, we have everyone, right? But Krishna is in the center, 100% for everyone. So the children who are Krishna's friends, the cowherd boys, they leave the house at 5:30 in the morning. Krishna still sleeps, but they are very eager. They get out early in the morning and they want to go and wake up Krishna. So before they leave, the mother packs prasad for them, bhoga for them, right? The mothers make wonderful sweetmeats. They make all kinds of wonderful things. The absorption of the mothers is not so much in feeding their children. They're constantly thinking, oh, Krishna would like this. Krishna would like that. And that's how they pack lunch for their own children. So it doesn't mean that there's only one Krishna and then there's just one person. There is an entire family of uncles and aunts and, father, mother, grandfather, so on and so forth, servants, friends. There are different mellows of relationship with Krishna and all exist there. But Krishna is in the center. So when we can bring Krishna right in the center here, we become eligible for entering such an environment. Until such time that we can bring Krishna right in the center here, we are not eligible to enter an environment. It's very simple logic. Because how do you enter a place where Krishna is right in the center if you have yourself not practiced and become a person who is keeping Krishna in the center? Right. Yes, Mataji. It's okay. Okay. Well, there are 5 mellows, but 4 predominant mellows of relationships with Krishna. Just as much as Krishna you can have a relationship with Krishna as a servant. Dasya. You can have a relationship with Krishna in the mellow of Sakya, friendship. You can have a relationship with Krishna in the mellow of Vatsalya, where Krishna is being looked upon as a child. And then you can have a relationship with Krishna in Madhurya Ras, where the relationship is like a husband-wife, man-wife, more like a boy-girl relationship, right? So that kind of relationship. So the fact is, that it takes all kinds to make a family. So in that sense, Krishna relishes all these specific relationships, but the level of intimacy is going to be the highest between husband and wife compared to son and father, or compared to friends, or compared to servants, right? So the Prabhupada used to give this example. Someone comes home, and as soon as they come home, the servant greets them and provides, some refreshment, ensures that they are comfortable, so on and so forth. That is a relationship, undeniably. And there's some proximity. There's some exchange of love between the master and the servant. But while that conversation is going on between the servant and the master, a friend comes in. The servant has to step aside and allow the friend to have a conversation with his master. So when there is a conversation going on in proximity at the same level between two friends, the parents come in. So immediately the precedence is given to the parents, because the parents take, priority. But even when the parents are with the person, when the wife comes, then the wife is given priority, because that is the closest relationship one is supposed to have. So in a similar fashion, Krishna has relationships. It's an entire village, Vrindavan, the different mellows of relationships, but there are gradations of intimacy based on the circumstances of the relationship. Because in every relationship there is service. So the fundamental aspect of relationship is service. Be it as a friend, be it as a servant, be it as a parent, be it as, Krishna's, wife or girlfriend, or the case may be. There's service. So if one does not understand to be a dasa dasanudas, then how they can even imagine entering into anything? Because they would never understand service. So we focus on primarily becoming a servant of the servant of the servant of Sri Lord Chaitanya, of the holy names. And when we serve the mission of Lord Chaitanya, we automatically make progress. One need not try to understand Krishna's Leela separately. If we serve the mission of Lord Chaitanya with dedication, then we automatically make progress in understanding Krishna. That is the gift which Srila Prabhupada has given us. Srila Prabhupada has written 65 volumes of books to prepare us to be the Dasa Dasanudas of Lord Chaitanya. Because knowing fully well that that position is the most secure position. That is Audarya. Lord Chaitanya is mercy personified, Mahavadanyaya. Krishna is not. Krishna in Vrindavan is with his friends, with his parents, he is enjoying. It is Lord Chaitanya in Mayapur who is crying for the souls and is distributing the holy names. So Srila Prabhupada has given us the mission of Lord Chaitanya and said, take the mission of Lord Chaitanya, and his books exemplify service. His books exemplify surrender. He is removing the obstacles that prevent us from surrendering to Lord Chaitanya's service. Because he, Prabhupada, knows that moment we surrender to Lord Chaitanya and serve the mission of Lord Chaitanya, automatically we will understand Krishna. We don't have to separately try and understand what is Krishna Leela. So all this information about our relationship with Krishna, about Krishna's relationship, everything becomes revealed automatically when the time is right, when we dedicate ourselves to spreading the mission of Lord Chaitanya. So that's what we need to do. We need to constantly focus on how to dedicate ourselves to serving the holy name. Everything else, it will follow. Because Lord Chaitanya is Mahavadanyaya. Right? If you go to Mayapur, you receive immense mercy to chant the holy names. Right? So everything is available in the holy names, and one who follows the mission of Lord Chaitanya is given everything. And that is the strategy followed by our acharyas, most prominently by Srila Prabhupada. Right? I have spoken something, but you understood something else. Let us see. That's what I gave a very elaborate answer. I gave you an answer that before we try to understand Krishna's relationship with what he enjoys better, we will have to understand our relationship with Lord Chaitanya's movement. Is this clear? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission, and by serving Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission, by serving the holy names nicely, we become purified to understand Krishna's relationships. Until then, we cannot understand Krishna's relationships. It is too complex. We cannot understand Krishna's relationships with our understanding of our relationships. Spiritual world, yes. There is no difference between Vrindavan and Navadvip. There is no difference. One can see the mission of, one can see Gaur Leela in Vrindavan. The acharyas who are there could always relish the presence of Lord Chaitanya. The acharyas in Navadvip could see Krishna in Navadvip performing his Leela, because there is really no difference between the two. There is no difference between Krishna and his holy names. Gaur Leela is the glorification of the holy names of Krishna, and Krishna Leela is his Leela itself. So there is no difference between the two. Do you understand? So they coexist in harmony, and they coexist here in harmony as well. I'm not saying that we are not qualified for anything. No, we are not. Because whatever we do, even the chanting of someone is chanting 16 rounds, the service that we do, that has absolutely does not come to the point of being able to, for us to reach the level of gifts that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has bestowed upon us. The position of Krishna Prema, which is the highest position in Krishna consciousness, that is not something that one can qualify themselves by chanting a few rounds and doing some little service. We are completely dependent on the mercy of the acharyas. We follow the orders of Srila Prabhupada to chant 16 malas of the Mahamantra, follow the regulative principles. We associate with the devotees nicely, and we automatically qualify for mercy. We are candidates of mercy, Kripa. When Srila Prabhupada came here, he initially said, you chant 64 malas. People were completely shaken of saying 64 malas, they counted, 7 minutes by 64, whatever the case may be. Not possible. Then he said, okay, he reduced by 16, 48. They said, no. Then he reduced another 16 and he said, chant 32 at least. They said, no, we can't do that either. Then he said, bare minimum 16, chant 16 malas. Because you need to chant 16 malas at least. So how can that qualify us for a gift which is so profound? We become qualified because Prabhupada has given us orders and he has made the promise. Krishna will fulfill that promise. So we become candidates of mercy. Right? So can we approach the spiritual realm with our activity? With, the anarthas, with the half-baked activity that we do, the distractions and so on and so forth? It's a challenge. So what we do is we follow the orders of the acharyas and wait in line to receive mercy, and mercy comes. That's the mission of Lord Chaitanya. So is it easier to approach someone who is throwing gifts, or is it easier to approach someone who is so aloof that you cannot even approach them? Lord Chaitanya is on the streets and he has sent his servants where he is distributing the holy names. And by distributing the holy names, we are coming proximity to Krishna. Otherwise, there's no chance. Yes. I'm sorry? Absolutely. Absolutely. Religion is not a modern concept. Religion translates as dharma, duties. See, fundamentally, when religion ends, spirituality begins. That's one definition. In other words, one has to follow rules and regulations and so on and so forth. Even if someone is completely an atheist, he is following certain rules and regulations which are ordered by the government for him to lead an orderly life. So one has to follow rules and regulations once they are on this planet for them to be able to make progress in life in general, materially speaking. And when they reach the point where they reach material frustration, because even someone who has received a lot over several lifetimes, they reach a point saying, I have experienced all of this. Those samskaras and those experiences are a part of the consciousness of the soul, even though it is many lifetimes ahead. He says, I've experienced all of this. He reaches frustration. He starts looking for the truth. He says, Aham Brahmasmi. I'm not this body. I'm spirit. Atato Brahma Jigyasa. I want to get into the knowledge of the spirit. I want to understand the spirit. So this whole concept of spirituality begins when organized religion ends in one perspective. But what we try and do, for instance, is what is the need for religion? There is a need for religion because it allows the vast masses to make steady progress and maintain basic rules of morality so that they do not fall away and they allow themselves to move slowly, stepping ahead. Now, I'm just coming to it. There are three different levels, materially speaking, of consciousness. There is the level of ignorance, tamasic, there is rajasic, and there is sattvic. Spirituality begins above sattva. Religion helps us by bringing us from tamas to rajas to sattva. It at least brings us from ignorance to passion to goodness. We use goodness as a means to proceed further to understand the higher truths. Now, how does the different religions of the world fit into the paradigm of Krishna consciousness? Where is this understanding that Krishna is connected to Jesus? When our faith is very deep, it allows us to look upon the teachings of others at a much deeper level. So the superficiality which covers us in terms of either dress, in terms of habits, so on and so forth, that superficiality is moved aside and we start looking for deeper truths in other revealed scriptures. So Jesus did make a mention in the Bible that there are many, many deeper truths that he did not reveal, because the Bible itself was meant to be given at a level where people would be able to follow the regular orders of society and be able to make progress. So is the case with Islam. So is the case with Judaism, or even the standard aspects of Hinduism, as we call it. The rules and regulations of the Vedas, where since childhood, growing up in India, we have been trained to approach the devas for help. Oh, you have to pass an exam, go to the Ganesha temple, break 108 coconuts. This is the same thing, where now we are kind of going there and then getting our so-called needs fulfilled temporarily. And then we reach a point of being frustrated, even though everything is being fulfilled, saying there must be something even deeper in life. So there is this particular aspect of Christianity, right? You have the length, you have the novenas, in the Catholics. I'm not sure if Catholicism is what is being followed, if people have a precedence. They follow Catholicism. I know that they go and then they offer alms and they go and during the Lent they fast, just as we fast. And then they say, oh, if you fulfill this, I will fast for X number of days. If you fulfill that, So this whole bargaining, which is being done with God, takes on different forms based on who is doing it. So the example which is given is, a professor is a PhD in mathematics. That professor has the capacity to teach a group of PhD students. The same professor, right, when he comes down to the undergraduate class, he tones down his teachings so that the undergraduate class can absorb it. So now you see that there is all the same mathematics that's being discussed, but then it is being toned down to suit the knowledge level and the absorption capacity of different bodies of students. The same calculus which is being spoken of in the PhD class is very different. It's toned down when it is being given in the undergraduate class. So now you have multiple religions which offer teachings which you somehow see have similarities, but also have differences, because there are gradations of students and they have been given to different people for them to be able to absorb and move ahead. And one has to realize life is a continuum. It is not a snapshot. What you are seeing as yourself, or I am seeing as myself today, is a snapshot of who we are in this lifetime. But in reality, if we have the perception and the ability, we would see that we have been so many different things over several lifetimes. And all of this is like a flash. It has gone from one movie to the other. There have been different experiences. So in that sense, if you actually look at it, it is the same God who is making arrangements in different ways to bring His children closer. Some children are at the basic level. They have been given basic instructions on morality. Some children have reached a point where they want to know Him even more. They have been given even more. So shastrically speaking, there is karma. You could be born into a family which has no connection with Krishna. But then your desire to know the intimate aspects of God is so great that you start making progress even though you're not connected to Krishna consciousness. There are many saints in Christianity whose writings are extraordinarily deep. Right? There are many who just chant the names of God just as we request, even though the names of God arranged by them are a little different, but they are glorifications of God, and they make extraordinary progress. So Krishna does not limit Himself because someone is born into a certain kind of environment. It is the same God. He makes Himself available based on the desire of the person. If someone has a deep desire to know Him, He removes all the obstacles and says, okay, here is the deepest knowledge. And He makes arrangements. So anyone who has gone deep enough into their own faith will understand other faiths. Right? Many years ago, my spiritual mentor, my Guru Maharaj, he was called to speak in an interfaith conference in Washington, D.C., where there was an imam, there was a rabbi, there was a bishop, and then there were representatives from other aspects, minor aspects of religion. And he challenged all of them, saying that interfaith dialogue cannot begin unless you go deep enough into your own faith. If you have gone deep enough into your own faith, then you would be able to see through the superficiality of other faiths. Just because someone is dressing up in a certain way, it prevents someone who is just religious to see that that person is also a servant of God. But if you have gone deep enough, then you are able to part away all the clothing and the coverings, and you're saying, oh, here's a soul who has done some wonderful things. You'll find a lot of similarity in the writings of very great personalities, and you will find that there's a deep connection. In other words, if today there is a conference in Washington, D.C., and you have the great acharyas like Ramanujacharya and other Nimbarkacharya and so many different Vaishnava acharyas, you have Jesus, you have Moses, you have Muhammad. Will they see differences? They will not, because they are professors who have taught different classes, but they are all PhDs. They would be able to see the similarity. That's how the connections are. Was there anything else? Exactly the point I was making, because people focus on superficiality. They have not gone deep enough. If they go deep enough, then they would be able to see deeper truths across the board. So when we focus on superficiality, then you start focusing on, oh, he is wearing tilak, oh, he is wearing a cloth, He is wearing a kurta, he is wearing a dhoti. He must be very different from me. My God is different from his God because we are focusing on the superficial aspects. One goes deep enough, they recognize faith. They should be able to recognize faith. It's not so. You got to understand the principle of the Shastras. Okay, we experience it. How do you experience anything? You practice it, you experience it. Right? There are intimate details of God. The most intimate aspect of God is where God gives up all formality. God gives up all formality. And we are worshipping Krishna in Vrindavan, where he has given up all formality. He is the son of Mother Yashoda. He is Yashoda Nandan. He is Radhika Raman. He is the friend, and then he is the master. But then he has given up all formality. So we discuss what he eats, what he likes to wear, what time does he go to bed, who his friends are, what is the name of his village, what is his street. These are intimate details of Godhead. And then you have other scriptures which talk about God, period, as a power beyond. So now when you're going into the intimate levels, you quite understand that there's greater detail. So this is the PhD. While there's something which is less rudimentary or less detailed. Yes. The fundamental aspects. She's Mother Marina. She's right, because as I just gave an example before, consciousness goes from ignorance, tamas, to rajas, to sattva, and from sattva it goes beyond. If you have a basic habit of not even following that which goes into sattva, what to speak of higher spirituality? You cannot even think about it. Right? It's a fact. Right? Is there anything else? When we chant nicely, we will have, when we are chanting nicely, we are basically requesting Krishna to engage us in his service. We are telling him, please Krishna, I am not qualified, engage me in your service. So, opportunities to serve him would automatically present themselves based on our chanting. So, if you ask me as to what is the best way to start, chant nicely. Everything else will follow automatically. You will have a desire to associate with devotees. When you come with devotees, you automatically have opportunities for more service. So everything follows from chanting nicely. Huh? Yes. Only chanting is enough. Only chanting is enough. You ask me, just sit and chant. If we sit and chant nicely, everything else will follow. Everything else will follow. Was there anything else? Srila Prabhupada ki. We made it to 9:45. That's my regular time. I was a little afraid that I finished a little early. I was saying, something must be wrong. Huh? Shri Jagan Radha Vrindavan Chandra ji.